Good day to everyone. This is now the second part of my presentation on how to prepare for the board examination. This one is the tips and tricks on how to answer the multiple choice board exam. But before that, let's begin with a simple quotation. Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated, according to Confucius. And this is true. The board exam is simple because it is a multiple choice. The question is there, the answer is there. But somehow, what makes it complicated is either because we, as an examinee, make it complicated. Instead of going directly to the issue, we think of so many things. Or simply because the examiner makes it difficult for us. Because multiple choice type of exam is a very flexible type of an examination. It can be in the form of a simple question wherein you just have to recall something, a definition of terms, or it can be a form of enumerations. But it can also become a complicated one in which we need to really analyze critically things like an application type of exam, a case analysis, so on and so forth. Okay, now let's have the tips and tricks on how to make it in the criminologist licensure examination. There are two parts of this discussion. The first is what makes up the board examination, and the second part is how should I approach the board examination, such as the criminologist licensure examination. Let us begin with the first part. Criminologist licensure examination is basically composed of the following subject coverage. One, we have the criminal law and jurisprudence, which is 20% in your overall average. The second is law enforcement administration, which is likewise 20%. So these two subjects are given on the first day of the examination. The criminal law and jurisprudence is basically composed of the following subjects: criminal law book 1, criminal law book 2, criminal procedure, evidence, and court testimony. On the other hand, the law enforcement administration is basically composed of six subjects, and they are the police organization and administration, police intelligence, police patrol, police record management. We also have the subject of industrial security management and the comparative policing system. Not to mention the fact that it also includes questions on police planning. The second day will be given also another two sets of questions, or rather subjects. Right? The first in the morning is the criminalistics, which is also 20%, and in the afternoon is the crime detection and investigation. The criminalistics is composed of the personal identification, forensic photography, ballistics or forensic ballistics, question document, polygraphy, legal medicine, and questions on forensic chemistry and toxicology. The third day will be focused on criminal sociology and correctional administration. And criminal sociology is basically composed of six subjects: the introduction to criminology, the introduction to criminal justice system, the ethics, human behavior in crisis management, and we have also the subject of juvenile delinquency and criminological research, the new addition in our sociology subject. And definitely in correction, we have two subject, the institutional and the non-institutional correction. By the way, in crime detections, we also have six subjects. No, we have the fundamentals of criminal investigation. We have the special crime investigation. We have the so-called fire technology and arson investigations. We have drug education and vice control. We also have traffic accident and investigation, and we have also the subject of organized crime. So these are the six subjects or categories of subjects in the board examination. Now, now let's move on to the first part. What makes up the criminology licensure examination, or simply what makes up a multiple choice board examination? There are actually two parts of the CLE. The first part is the so-called the body or the stem. This is referring to the main statement, which can be in a form of a fill in the blank, a simple question of memory recall, an application type, a case analysis, or even a question of which does not belong to the following. Now take note that questions in the board are generally grouped into three. Majorities of the question belongs to the easy category, followed by the moderate, and the third is the difficult part. Take note, according to a statistical study conducted by the PRC, since the board is given in multiple choice, many of the examinees committed mistakes not on the difficult questions, but actually on the simple questions. The reason why is very simple. When questions are easy, there is a tendency for examinees, especially those who are a little bit good or or of higher caliber somehow or well prepared, if they are well confident or too much confident, they took the question lightly. Or worse, they become so careless because since the question is easy, they take the question easy. So they think immediately of an answer, and what comes in their mind, they look on the choices. And if it is there, what they think, it is the answer. So somehow they become blind of which is really the correct answer. The second part is the so-called choices. The choices are subdivided into two parts, the detractors and the key. What is the so-called detractors? The detractors is actually referring to the choices which are given to distract or to hinder the examinee in identifying the correct answer among the choices. And the sad reality is the detractors is definitely more than the key because there's only one correct answer. So if there are four choices or five choices in the multiple choice, the three of which are the detractors and the remaining one is the correct answer. If it is five choices, four are the detractors and only one is the correct answer. That's why somehow it can become difficult depending on how we approach the examination and how prepared we are. Okay, what shall we do? Since the board exam is a multiple choice, we should know the fact that different types of exam requires a different approaches. If an exam is merely an enumeration, it's good for those who have a very strong memory retention power, those who can easily memorize. But if it is a case analysis, then understanding and critical thinking is very important. So multiple choice, what techniques are we going to apply? We follow the scientific approach, which were tested and proven by scientists. And what are these techniques? Basically, we apply the acronym ACE. But for this part, I put an additional S, which I called it ACEs. The A stands for analysis. And what is analysis? Analysis is simply identifying or recognizing. It is recognizing what is really being asked. The process is we must dissect the stem into parts and understand it very clearly and carefully. Now, why analysis is the first and the most important, actually, somehow? The reason is we could not get a right answer from a wrong question. What does it mean? There is no question that we can read, but the question is, do we really know how to read? No? Real reading is when we read and we understand what we are reading. And that's the problem somehow. Examinees makes mistakes in identifying or in understanding the question. So if you made a wrong interpretation of the question, definitely you will look for a wrong answer. And the bad side of it is the wrong answer is also there somehow in the choices. That's why sometimes the examiner thinks it's the correct answer, where in fact there is a better answer. Okay? So, dyan magaling ang Pilipino somehow. Diba? We answer even though we did not understand the question. Or we jump into conclusion. Just like when two persons are conversing. When one say, pare, kumain ka na? The answer is, pare, busog pa ako. Another, pare, saan ka galing? Pare, pauwi na ako eh. So we will notice in these two examples, the question is so short and simple, and yet the answer is not jive. It doesn't match with the question given. But the worst part of it is they understand each other. Nagkaintindihan pa rin sila. Now, the logical reason is very obvious. They are both person and person can think. But the board exam is not that way. Test paper is just a piece of paper. It is not like persons who can think and understand what we are answering. So it's our obligation to understand, to analyze the question, and to appreciate the choices. And not to think over and not to make addition or deletion on the contents because that will lead us to the wrong answer. After understanding the question, we go to the second part. And what is that? The letter C, which stands for comparison. Comparison is defined as the process of setting two or more things side by side. Now, why do we need to put things side by side? So that we can easily compare them. We can identify their characteristics. We can weigh that characteristics, whether it is a generic or a specific characteristics, or we called it also classical or class and individual characteristics. Then we weigh how far they are similar or different from one another. And in the board, what do we compare? We compare the choices with the question. If the choice does not match with the question, so definitely it doesn't deserve our attention. We have to remove it from the options. That is why the third part is letter E, which stands for elimination, otherwise known as exclusion. In personal identification, we know that there are two general methods of identifying a thing or a person or whatever, and that is comparison and exclusion. Because when we make comparison, we can easily see the difference and similarities. When we do elimination, we can reduce, okay, our options and we can concentrate on the more likely, probable, and correct thing that we are trying to identify. Okay, so what we are going to eliminate is definitely the detractors. So once we eliminate each one of the detractors, we will be sure that what is left is most likely the correct answer. But sometimes the problem in the board, we were able to eliminate two options, but the two remaining options are very close to each other. So what are we going to do? Okay. The board exam usually lasts for about 2.5 hours. So practically you have 2 minutes and 10 seconds to answer one item. Therefore, you should not be in a hurry. if you are confused about the two remaining questions, then it's not a waste of time to go back to the question. We might overlook some clue or some guide in the question or statement itself that will lead us to the correct answer. Then after that, we weigh the two remaining options and select the best answer based on our sound judgment. That is the so-called the fourth one. That's the process of selection. Okay. Now let's have the tips on how to approach the examination by having an example. Because as you know, giving example is the simple way to explain things. The first rule is analyze the question carefully and completely. Dissect the question for easy understanding. Somehow, the problem is we know the right term, but there are terms that are categorized in certain level or aspect, such as there is such thing as generic term, there is such thing we called technical term, just like in criminalistics. In law, we have legal terms. We also have layman's term, and somehow we have colloquial term. And there are still other terms referring to the same thing. So we have to be careful in understanding simple question because the easier the question is, the choices become more easier for the examiner to think of, and he can make it complicated with the choices, not really with the question. We have to know whether the question is asking for generic or specific answer. So let's try an application. We have here a simple question, a definition of term, or a memory recall. Okay. What is an act or omission punishable by the revised penal code? The question is quite short and easy. Let's look at the choices. A, crime; B, infraction; C, offense; and D, felony. We have to be careful. If you look at all the options, they are quite similar and they are quite responding to the questions. But we have to be careful. What is really asked here? Is the question about a specific term or a generic legal term? Act or omission punishable by? Does the question said punishable by law? No, the question said revised penal code. Therefore, there is a specific law mentioned here. So, are we going to answer crime? Let's have a comparison. Crime is defined as an act or omission punishable by law. So, therefore, crime is a generic term, applies to all act or omission as long as it is punished by law, either by fine or an imprisonment. So therefore, crime can be correct, but it's not the best answer. Let's look at the second option, B, infraction. It is defined as an act or omission in violation of ordinance. We know that infraction is usually referring to minor offenses. It is not actually in the revised, but in the city, municipal, or provincial ordinances. So it's not the correct answer. We have two remaining options, offense and felony. What is an offense? Offense is an act or omission punishable by special law. Now look, special law, or more specifically, is special penal law, because not all special laws provides for punishment. So does it match with the question? Obviously not. So therefore, what is left is felony. And most likely, that is the correct answer. So we eliminate crime, we eliminate infraction, and we eliminate offense, which means the correct answer is what? Felony. Now, just another tip. Usually, if the question is easy, applying the concept of item analysis, the examiner will not put the correct answer on the letter A. Most of the time, examiner will put it either on the later part, which is either on the letter C or letter D. Why? Because that is one technique that can be utilized in order to trick the examinees. Because if the letter A is similar to the correct answer and you made a wrong analysis, you might commit a mistake answering letter A. And yet, at the end of the day, you will realize that the best answer is in the letter D or letter C. I hope that will help a lot. And that should be something that you inculcate in your mind, never to forget. In easy question, careful. Don't be in a hurry. Don't be careless. Be diligent enough. And if you are confused, try to make use of some techniques, such as the technique being used in item analysis. Okay, so let's now move on to the moderate type of question. The first question or the next question is, what is an act or omission punishable by the revised penal code which was amended by a special law? This time, the question was complicated because of an additional phrase which was amended by a special law. Okay, so looking at the choices is the same with our previous. We have crime, we have felony, we have offense, and we have infractions. So what does it mean when we say amended? Amendments merely change or make some modification on the law. It does not totally repeal nor replace the existing law. It only makes some changes. So therefore, the statement or the phrase which was amended by a special law does not affect the sentence, even though the crime that was enumerated or defined in the revised penal code was amended by a special law, it remains to be under the revised penal code. So obviously, it cannot be a crime because crime is a generic term, applies to all acts or omission punishable by law. It cannot be an infraction because it is an act or omission in violation of ordinances. It cannot be an offense, and obviously the answer will be the same as the previous one. It is still a felony. So, looking at the previous question and this number two question, you will notice that there is a variation in the approach of the question, and yet the answers remains to be the same. So this is how somehow the examiner makes the question becomes a little or more complicated so that the examinees will have some time to think and be confused about the presentation. Now let's have a more shall we say, complicated presentation. There you are. A difficult one. This is an application type. And look, Peter committed the crime of rape, which is punishable under the revised penal code. Period. Later, it was amended by Republic Act 8353. What class of crime is rape? So just like the previous question, it still talks about an act that is punishable by the revised penal code. Only that it is in a form now of an application or a situation where the question made mention about a particular person committing a particular crime that is enumerated and defined under the revised penal code. And then there is again a modification. Later, it was amended by a special law, Republic Act 8353, or the anti-rape law. So what will be our approach? Again, just like the previous one, the word used here is only amended, not repealed or not totally revised. So therefore, if the revised penal code was only amended by a special law, the crime is still falls under the revised penal code. So looking again at the choices, it remains to be the crime, the felony, the offense, or the delinquency. This time I just make some modification. Instead of infraction, I put delinquency. But obviously, delinquency cannot be a correct answer because delinquency is merely an act or omission that is not in conformity with the norms of our society. Okay? Once it is committed by a minor, we called it juvenile delinquency. So again, it cannot be a crime, it cannot be an offense. The correct answer is felony. Let's have another example. A metallic or non-metallic ball propelled from a firearm. Is it A, bullet, B, slug, C, shot, D, missile, or E, projectile? Now we have now five options here. Just like the previous question, this is a matter of easy and memory recall. But again, looking at the choices, all the options are actually related and close to the question. For in fact, they can all be an answer, definitely. But the rule is we have to choose only one, the best among the rest. Will it be a bullet? A bullet is defined as a metallic or non-metallic ball propelled from a firearm, but it is specifically referring to those which are fired from a small arms. So it is not a bullet, but it can be a correct answer. Is it a slugs? Slugs is a term used by the police when they are referring to bullet. So therefore slug is a police term. Is it a shot? A shot is another term used when we are referring to bullet. While missile is another form of metallic or non-metallic ball but usually fired from an artillery weapon. So obviously, it is not any of the A, B, C, and D. It cannot be a slug. It cannot be a shot. It is not a missile. It is not a bullet. The correct and the best answer is what? Projectile. Why? Because if you go back to the definition of ballistics, as you learned from the book of Del Rosario, ballistic is the science of motion of projectile. So the generic term that is used when we are referring to that which were propelled from a firearm, we use the term projectile. But if in case projectile is not one among the options, then the best and the closest answer will be bullet. Now, that is an example, a typical example of what I said before, that somehow we cannot choose the answer that we want. Why? Because we are not the examiner. We are just an examinee. Okay? The best that we can do is to appreciate what is laid down or what is presented in the enumeration or in the choices. So if the best answer that we think is not there, it means the examiner has a better answer and it is the one there in the choices. But if in case the answer is not really there, it might be a typographical error, and in that case you must inform the proctor, and the proctor should inform the PRC so that it can be considered as a bonus. Okay, we have another example here. It is that part of a cartridge which actually propel from a firearm and creates an injury to the target. This is what I said a while ago. Projectile is not in the choices given. This was a previous question given in the board. So in that case, if bullet is there, then bullet will be the best option. Okay. This is the summary for that. Projectile is a metallic or non-metallic ball propelled from a firearm. Bullet is a projectile used for small arms. Slugs is the police term. Shot is the other term. And missile is a projectile for artillery. Next one. A simple yet many got a wrong answer on this item. The word forensic means blank. You ask yourself, what is being asked? Is the question asking for the origin or is it asking for the meaning? You know, there are two ways by which we give a meaning or essence to a word. One is by its etymology or origin, and the other one is by its real essence or definition. So here, the question is not about the origin, it's about the meaning. So if you will not think that way, most likely you will be just like the others who will immediately answer forum. And yet, that is not the perfect answer. Why? Because if you remember the origin of the word forensic, the word forensic is derived from a Latin word. Okay? It is a Latin word forum, which means a marketplace, a place where people gathered for purposes of public discussion. Okay? So that is the origin of the word forensic. So, forum is not the meaning, it is the origin. Marketplace is the literal meaning of the word forum. And marketplace is a place for public discussion. So definitely A, B, and D are more of an options with respect to origin, not the true meaning. So therefore, if A, B, and D are wrong, the correct answer is we have no choice. The only one left is letter C in relation to administration of justice. Actually, administration of justice is the very essence of the word forensic. That's why every time we attach the word forensic with any field of study, it means administration or application to the administration of justice. I hope that's clear. Okay. Now let's go to the second rule. Beware of words not, no, except, unless, or otherwise. These are the negative words. Normally, once one of these are given or is given in the choices, or rather in not in choices, in the question rather, definitely it connotes a negative idea. Meaning, what is being asked is normally what is not included or what is kung sa Tagalog, alin ang naiba. Okay. So let's have an example here. Which of the following is not a pillar of the U.S. criminal justice system? And the choices are A, law enforcement, B, prosecution, C, we have the court, and D, we have corrections. Okay, so we know in our review of U.S. criminal justice system, there are only three pillars, okay, in the U.S. justice system. And what are they? Is it A, law enforcement? Yes, that is definitely included as a pillar because all criminal justice system, I assume, has the so-called law enforcement as a pillar. Is it prosecution? Oh, this is quite questionable. Okay. What about court? Yes, court is usually a common pillars in a criminal justice system. What about correction? Yes, this is also a pillar in the US criminal justice system. So therefore, the correct answer is what? Is prosecution. Why? Because the question has a negative statement not. Now, what if we change the question and we present it this way? The following are pillars of the U.S. criminal justice system, comma, except. Now, does it make the question different? Actually, the question is just the same with the previous. The only difference is the format. We remove the word not, but we replace it with the word except. What does it mean? Except and not means the same thing. So therefore, the question is the same, which is not. Alin ang hindi pillars ng US criminal justice system? So with this first question and the question at the bottom, the remaining answer is the same. Prosecution. Because law enforcement, court, and corrections are pillars of the US criminal justice system. Now let's make a modification. Question number two is actually one of the recent, no, okay, presentations that are being used by the examiner in the board exam, wherein there are multiple items to choose from before they provide the choices. Okay, so let's read. Which of the following is not a pillar of the US criminal justice system? Comma, except. This time, we have the word not, but there is the word except at the later part. So you notice this is a double negative statement. So negative times negative, applying the principle of algebra, that is what? Positive. So some students or examinees got confused about this. And they say, ano ba to? Now, to understand it very easily and to clearly identify what really is being asked, we do a simple approach. Remove not and remove except. If we remove the two words, the statement will simply become which of the following is a pillar of the US justice system. And as what we discussed a while ago, law enforcement, court, and corrections are all the three pillars under the US justice system. So therefore, what is the best answer? Is it A, 1, 2, and 3? No, because 2, prosecution, is not included. Is it B, 2, 3, 4? Again, no, because there is Roman numeral number 2. Is it C, 1, 3, and 4? Yes, that is the perfect answer for this item. So the answer is letter C. But again, look at letter D. 1, 2, and 4. Why it is not the correct? Because there is Roman numeral number 2. So always remember, before you choose the best answer, always give chances to all the choices. Look at them and analyze. Okay? Now, this is the summary for the first and two questions. Okay, so this is the summary of the first and second question. The pillars of the criminal justice system by comparison. In US, they only have three. That is LCC, the acronym. In the Philippines, we have five, and the acronym is LPCCC. So, you will notice that in the Philippines, the five pillars are as follows: law enforcement, prosecution, court, correction, and community, according to their proper sequence. Now, I marked prosecution and community red because simply those are the pillars that cannot be found in the US criminal justice system setting. Now, but another pointer for easy recall, looking at your five fingers, you can represent or you can assign each one of the five pillars in each of your finger, and that will guide you in recalling which pillars and what is that pillars doing. Like for example, the middle finger can be the law enforcement. Why? Because it is the longest among the five pillar. It means it is the front liner. It is the initiator of the criminal justice system. Now, the index finger is the prosecution. Why? Because it is the one that prosecutes the accused. It represents the people and the state. The thumb finger represents the court because the court decides whether we are guilty or not. Correction is the ring finger because it is for the confinement, for the commitment of those who have been adjudged guilty or even those who are waiting for the final disposition of their case. And the little finger is the community because actually it should have been the first pillar. Why? Because crime originates in our community. Okay, so I decided to cut my presentation so that uh, my followers will be excited. No, there is a second part of these presentations because we have so many pointers or tips that I have prepared for you to easily approach the board exam. So I hope that you will follow and subscribe the succeeding video presentations that I have prepared for you, especially those who wanted to prepare really for the exam and those who are teaching reviews for licensure examination. That's for today. God bless and uh, keep safe to everyone.